God says, stop and listen carefully, because what you are about to hear is not an accident, not a coincidence, and not something your emotions are exaggerating to make you feel better about a season that broke you quietly. Heaven saw it. Heaven saw every moment of it, the pain no one else witnessed, the wound that never bled visibly, but bled anyway. The cruelty that left no mark anyone else could point to, but left you changed in ways only you could feel. And tonight, God is saying something he's been preparing to say for a long time. The one who hurt you in silence is about to face justice, not the kind of justice you have to manufacture, not the kind you have to force or plan or chase, but the kind that only heaven can deliver, arriving exactly when it is supposed to arrive, in a way you will not be able to mistake for coincidence. There is a specific kind of pain that almost no one talks about, the pain of being hurt by someone in a way that leaves no evidence, not a public insult you could point to, not a physical wound anyone could see, a quiet exclusion, a cold shift in tone that only you noticed because you were the one it was aimed at, a conversation happening about you instead of with you, one you were never meant to overhear but somehow did anyway, a slow, deliberate withdrawal of warmth designed to make you question your own perception of what was happening. This kind of hurt is uniquely exhausting because it comes with an added burden most other wounds do not carry. The burden of having to prove it was even real. You could not show anyone a bruise. You could not point to a single sentence dramatic enough to justify how deeply it wounded you. So you carried it alone, second-guessing yourself in the very moments you needed to trust yourself the most, wondering if you were simply too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, when the truth was that you were simply the only witness to something someone else made sure stayed hidden. God is saying tonight, I saw it. Every version of it. The version you tried to explain to a friend who could not quite understand why it hurt as much as it did, because the details sounded so small out loud. The version you replayed alone at night, turning it over and over, trying to find the moment where you could have prevented it, as if the responsibility for someone else's cruelty was somehow yours to carry. The version you buried because bringing it up again felt exhausting, felt pointless, felt like it would only convince people you were holding on to something you should have let go of by now. Heaven witnessed every layer of it, the parts you spoke and the parts you never found the words for, and none of it went unnoticed, even when it felt like the entire world moved on without registering that anything had happened at all. Let me describe some specific shapes this silent hurt may have taken in your life, because naming it precisely often does more healing work than any general comfort ever could. Maybe it was a parent who withheld approval so consistently that you spent your entire childhood performing for a warmth that never fully arrived, and no one around you ever called it what it was, because on the surface, nothing looked wrong. Maybe it was a friend who slowly, deliberately excluded you from a group you used to belong to, never through a single dramatic confrontation, just a series of small omissions, an invitation that stopped coming, a group chat you were quietly removed from, a closeness that evaporated without explanation. Maybe it was a partner who made you feel small in ways so subtle you spent years questioning whether you were simply too sensitive, comments disguised as jokes, comparisons disguised as honesty, a coldness that arrived and left on their schedule while you were left managing the emotional aftermath alone. Maybe it was a coworker or a family member who undermined you behind closed doors, whose sabotage never had your name attached to it directly, but whose fingerprints you could feel on every closed door and missed opportunity that followed. Whichever shape it took in your specific story, God is not asking you to prove it happened tonight. God already knows exactly what happened, in exact detail, and that knowledge alone is worth more than any external validation you have spent years quietly hoping to receive. This is the part where I need you to actually receive what is being said, instead of letting it wash over you the way you have let so much comfort wash over you without absorbing it. You are not imagining the coldness. You are not making up the exclusion. You are not overreacting to the way your presence started to feel unwelcome in spaces where you used to belong without question. Your perception was accurate the entire time, and the fact that no one else could see it did not make it less real. It only made it lonelier. And loneliness layered on top of pain is its own particular kind of suffering, the kind that convinces a person their wound does not count simply because it does not look like the wounds other people recognize. There is one more layer to this. I want you to carry with you after tonight, something that applies far beyond this specific situation. The capacity you are building right now to release what you cannot control, to trust an outcome you cannot see, to heal without requiring someone else's confession first, is a capacity that will serve you in every future season of your life, not just this one. Every person eventually faces some version of this exact test, someone who hurts them without ever fully owning it, a wound that never gets the closure a movie ending would provide. The people who learn to release it anyway, without waiting for the story to resolve the way they scripted it, tend to move through the rest of their lives with a freedom the people still waiting for their villain's downfall never quite reach. You are building that freedom right now, tonight, whether or not you can fully feel it yet. I also want to gently remind you that healing does not require you to become someone who no longer feels anything about what happened. It requires you to become someone the memory no longer controls. There is a difference between numbness and peace is always the actual goal. Numbness is simply pain wearing a disguise, still running the show quietly in the background. Peace is the memory existing without governing your present decisions, your present relationships, or your present sense of who you are allowed to become. That is what tonight is actually offering you, not the erasure of what happened, but the freedom to stop letting it write every chapter that comes after it. I know the question underneath all of this, the one you have probably asked in the dark more than once. If God saw it happening, why did he let it continue for as long as it did? Why did the silence stretch on for months, sometimes years, before this exact message finally arrived to name it? Here is the honest answer, and it will not erase the pain, but it may help you carry it differently. God does not usually stop someone else's free will mid-cruelty, because doing so would remove the very freedom that makes genuine love and genuine choice possible for everyone, including you. What God does instead is walk with you through it, gathering every tear, every unspoken moment, every night you carried it silently, and store it as evidence, not evidence you need to present anywhere, but evidence that nothing you experienced went unnoticed, unrecorded, or unaddressed in the account that actually matters. The delay in addressing it publicly was never a delay in God caring about it privately. Those two things have never been the same, and confusing them is exactly what has made this season feel so much lonelier than it needed to. If what I am describing is landing somewhere specific in your chest right now, if a memory has already surfaced of a person, a room, a season where you felt exactly this, comment the word "seen" right now before we go any further, because that word is your declaration that you are done pretending this did not affect you as deeply as it actually did. Like this message so it reaches someone else who has spent years minimizing a pain that was never small to begin with. And stay with me, because the next part explains exactly what heaven means when it says justice is coming, and it is probably not what you are picturing right now. I need to correct something before we go further, because most people hear the word justice and immediately picture exposure, humiliation, a dramatic public reckoning where the person who hurt them finally gets what they deserve in front of an audience. That is not usually how heaven's justice works, and understanding this now will save you from the disappointment of waiting for a spectacle that was never coming in the first place. Divine justice is rarely loud. It is rarely public. It rarely looks the way revenge fantasies script it in the privacy of your own mind during the hardest nights. Sometimes justice looks like a person slowly losing the very thing they gained by hurting you. A position, a relationship, a reputation, crumbling quietly over time without anyone ever connecting it back to what they did to you. Sometimes justice looks like that person facing themselves in a moment of unexpected stillness, forced to confront the version of themselves they have spent years avoiding. And sometimes, the most common outcome of all, justice simply looks like you healing so completely that their cruelty stops having any power over you whatsoever, which, though it may not satisfy the part of you that wants them to suffer visibly, is actually the most complete form of justice there is, because it means they no longer control any part of your life, not even in memory. I know that answer might not feel satisfying right now, especially if the wound is still fresh, especially if some part of you wants to see them brought low in a way the whole world would recognize. That desire is human, and no one is going to shame you for feeling it. But I need you to hear something important about that desire before it quietly starts running your life the way the original hurt already did. The moment you make someone else's downfall the measurement of your healing, you hand them control over your peace all over again, this time by your own permission instead of theirs. Real freedom does not require you to witness their consequences. Real freedom is being able to walk fully into your future regardless of whether their consequences ever become visible to you at all. This is where I need to pull you into a hard turning point, because I know some part of you might be tempted to stop listening here, disappointed that this message is not building toward the dramatic exposure you were hoping for. Do not turn away yet, because what comes next explains something about your own healing that you have probably never fully understood, and it is the piece that makes everything else in this message actually make sense. Here is what happens in the unseen realm the moment you finally stop carrying this pain, the way you have been carrying it. Something shifts, not just in you, but around the entire situation. in ways that often become visible only much later, long after you have stopped watching for them. The energy you spent replaying the hurt gets redirected toward your own growth instead. The vigilance you spend protecting yourself from being hurt the same way again gets redirected toward genuinely trusting people who have actually earned it. And strangely, mysteriously, the less attention you give to what happened to you, the more room heaven has to work on the situation without your interference, your anger, your need for control over an outcome that was never yours to control in the first place. Justice tends to move fastest in the lives of people who have finally released their grip on needing to witness it. I want to speak to something else underneath this, something that is often the real source of the ache long after the initial wound has scarred over. It is not just the hurt itself, it is the silence that followed it. The way life continued as if nothing had happened. The way the person who hurt you never had to answer for it, never had to sit with what they did, never even seemed to notice the damage they left behind, while you were the one left to clean it up, alone, without acknowledgement, without apology, sometimes without even a clear enough narrative to explain to yourself exactly what had happened and why it hurt as much as it did. That silence is its own wound, layered on top of the original one, and heaven sees that layer too. God is not only addressing what was done to you, God is addressing the years of unacknowledged aftermath you have quietly carried because no one ever gave you the closure you deserved. If you are still here, if this message has already reached something you have never said out loud to anyone, comment the word justice right now, because declaring it changes something in the spiritual atmosphere around this situation that silent hoping never could. Subscribe if this is the first time a message has actually addressed the specific kind of pain you have been carrying, instead of a version watered down enough to apply to everyone. Share this with someone you know has been quietly suffering the same way, because sometimes the most healing thing a person can hear is confirmation that their invisible wound was never actually invisible to heaven. I want to speak honestly about something that happens in the weeks after a message like this reaches someone, because I do not want you caught off guard by it. Once you hear that justice is coming, there is a strong pull to start watching for it, refreshing, checking, waiting for the first visible sign that the person who hurt you is finally facing consequences. That pull is completely understandable, but it can quietly undo the very release this message is trying to help you reach. Watching for someone's downfall keeps you tethered to them in exactly the way healing is supposed to release you from. It keeps your emotional energy oriented around their life instead of your own, and it makes your peace conditional on something you have no control over and, honestly, may never even witness directly. The healthiest posture is not vigilant waiting. It is quiet trust. The kind that hands the situation over completely and then genuinely turns attention back toward building the life that was interrupted by all of this in the first place. There is also a specific kind of guilt that sometimes surfaces once someone starts to heal from silent hurt like this. A guilt that says, moving on too easily means what happened was not serious enough to still be affecting you. Or conversely, that still being affected by it means you have not moved on enough. Chosen one, healing is not linear and it does not follow a schedule anyone else gets to judge. Some days this wound will feel entirely behind you. Other days, a smell, a song, a passing resemblance will bring it rushing back with surprising intensity. And that does not mean you have failed at healing. It simply means you are human, carrying a real memory of a real experience. And real memories do not disappear on command simply because enough time has passed. Be patient with the parts of you that still ache sometimes. Patience is not the opposite of progress. It is often the exact environment progress requires in order to actually take root. Let's talk about what it looks like practically to release this without pretending the hurt did not happen, because there is a difference between forgiveness and denial, and far too many people confuse the two and end up performing peace they have not actually reached. Releasing this does not mean deciding it did not matter. It does not mean rewriting the story to make the other person look less responsible than they were. It means acknowledging fully, honestly, without minimizing, exactly what happened and exactly how much it cost you, and then making the deliberate choice to stop letting that cost accumulate any further. Every day you continue carrying unprocessed pain from this is another day of interest added to a debt you were never actually required to keep paying. The person who hurt you is very likely not thinking about it at all right now, has probably moved through their life largely unaffected by what they did, while you have been the one still paying installments on a wound they walked away from without a second thought. That imbalance is not fair, and no one is telling you it is. But continuing to carry it does not restore fairness. It simply extends the unfairness into every future day you allow it to occupy space that could belong to your healing instead. I want to walk you through some of the signs that this release is actually beginning to happen in your life, because it rarely arrives with a dramatic before and after moment, and I do not want you to miss it simply because it shows up quietly instead of announcing itself. You will notice their name stops carrying the same physical reaction it used to, the tightness in your chest, the racing thoughts softening into something closer to neutral. You will notice you can be in the same room, the same family gathering, the same shared circle, without spending the entire time bracing yourself. You will notice you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to people who were never present for what happened and never will fully understand it. You will notice a strange, quiet indifference beginning to replace the constant vigilance you used to carry around this specific wound, not because you stopped caring about yourself, but because you finally stopped needing this particular person to matter as much as they used to. There is also a warning I need to give you here, because this is exactly the point in the healing process where people sometimes sabotage their own progress without realizing it. Do not go looking for evidence of their downfall. Do not check their social media hoping to see cracks forming in the life they built after hurting you. Do not ask mutual friends for updates disguised as casual curiosity. Every time you go looking for proof that justice is happening, you hand the situation back to yourself to manage, when the entire point of trusting heaven with this is releasing your grip on needing to witness the outcome firsthand. If justice ever does become visible to you, it will find you. You will not need to go hunting for it, and the peace of not hunting is worth infinitely more than any satisfaction the hunting could ever provide. I also want to talk about something silent. Hurt often damages the people rarely mention. Your relationship with your own perception. When someone hurts you in a way that leaves no visible evidence, and the world around you continues as though nothing happened, it can quietly teach you to distrust your own read of situations, your own feelings, your own instincts about people. You may have noticed yourself becoming hypervigilant since then, overanalyzing every interaction, questioning whether you are reading too much into small shifts in someone's tone or behavior, terrified of being made to feel crazy again the way you may have felt during the original hurt. Part of tonight's healing is not just releasing the person who hurt you. It is reclaiming trust in your own discernment, learning again that your read of a situation deserves respect even when you cannot immediately prove it to someone else's satisfaction. You do not need external confirmation to know when something feels wrong. You never did. That instinct was never broken. It was simply wounded by someone who benefited from you doubting it, and tonight is part of the process of rebuilding it. Before we move toward the closing of this message, I want to give you one more rehook. Because if you have made it this far, what remains is the part that actually seals everything we have talked about tonight. There is a difference between people who hear a message like this and feel briefly comforted before returning to old patterns of rumination by morning, and people who let it actually change something permanent in how they carry this pain moving forward. If you want to be the second kind of person, comment the word released right now, because that word marks tonight as the specific point where you chose differently than you have chosen every other night. This memory resurfaced. Like this video if any part of the last few minutes reached a place in you that you thought no one would ever understand well enough to speak to directly. I also want to address the fear that sometimes creeps in around this kind of release. The fear that letting go somehow means the hurt did not matter, that moving forward is a betrayal of how significant the wound actually was. Chosen one, healing was never a statement that the wound was small. It is a statement that you refused to let something that was inflicted on you continue defining the rest of your life. The size of your healing does not diminish the size of what happened. If anything, it honors it, because it means the pain did not succeed in permanently shrinking who you are capable of becoming. Letting go is not forgetting. It is refusing to let the memory continue functioning as a wound instead of simply becoming a scar, present, part of your story, but no longer actively bleeding. This is where the message needs to shift, because it is time to move from explanation into declaration. Say this with me, out loud if you can, quietly if you must, but mean every word as you say it. I release the need to witness their downfall, and I trust that justice does not require my supervision to be real. I release the silence that followed the hurt, and I stop expecting an apology I may never receive in order to finally heal. I release the exhausting work of proving this pain was legitimate, because I no longer need anyone else's validation to know what I lived through was real. I forgive, not because what they did was acceptable, but because I refuse to let their cruelty keep authoring chapters of my life they were never invited into in the first place. I trust that heaven saw everything I carried alone, and I trust that heaven does not need my help to make things right. Now let's bring this before heaven directly, because there are some releases that only fully happen in prayer. Father, thank you for seeing what no one else saw. for witnessing the pain I carried in silence when I did not have the words or the audience to explain it properly. Thank you for not requiring me to prove this wound before you acknowledged it as real. I bring this hurt to you honestly tonight, without minimizing it and without exaggerating it, exactly as heavy as it actually was. I released the person who hurt me into your hands, not because what they did was acceptable, but because carrying judgment over their life was never a weight I was designed to hold indefinitely. Deal with them the way only you can, with justice, with truth, and if it is your will, with the same transformation you have offered me every time I have fallen short of who you called me to be. Heal the part of me that still flinches at their name. Heal the part of me that still rehearses conversations that will probably never happen the way I imagine them. Heal the part of me that still measures my worth by whether they ever acknowledge what they did. Teach me to release without pretending, to forgive without forgetting, and to move forward without needing their downfall as proof that my pain mattered. Restore what their silence tried to steal from me: my confidence in my own perception, my trust in my own experience, my ability to believe myself even when no one else was there to confirm what I already knew was true. Surround me now with people who see me clearly, who do not require me to minimize what I have been through in order to make them comfortable. Let this season be the last time I have to carry a wound like this one entirely alone. And for the one who hurt me, I release them fully, trusting that whatever needs to happen in their life will happen in your timing, not mine, and that my healing was never actually dependent on their consequence to begin with. Seal this release in me completely tonight. Let it not be a temporary relief that resurfaces every time their name comes up in conversation, but a real, lasting freedom that lets me move forward with an open heart instead of a guarded one. What was hidden has now been seen. What was silent has now been acknowledged. And what was broken is now being restored, not by pretending the wound never happened, but by trusting you with the parts of it I was never able to fix on my own. It is finished. It is released. It is healed. In Jesus' name, amen. If this message reached the exact place in your heart it was meant to reach tonight, do not let this moment pass in silence, the way so many other moments have passed unacknowledged. Comment the word healed if you are finally releasing this instead of carrying it one more day. Comment the word seen if tonight is the first time someone has actually named the specific kind of pain you have been carrying quietly for far too long. Like this message so it reaches someone else who has spent years convincing themselves their invisible wound did not count. Subscribe, because there is more truth being prepared for exactly the season you are walking through, more clarity for pain you have never fully found the words for. Share this with the one person you know has been carrying a silent hurt of their own, because tonight might be the night they finally stop carrying it alone. The truth has been spoken, the justice has been declared, the healing is already beginning.